which has been conducted through Microsoft Teams platform that we're all used to now. Before we start the meeting, it is a usual fashion to begin with prayer, and I'll ask Councillor John Mackay to lead us in prayer, please. Thank you.
Oh, Father in heaven, we thank thee that we are able to gather even in this way. We thank you that thou art a merciful God and that thou hast sustained us. We thank thee that thou hast opened up a way for sinners in thy only begotten Son. He was a sacrifice to satisfy divine justice. We thank you that he is the way, the truth, and the life, and there is no other way unto thee. And we pray, Lord, that we would exalt and glorify thy name, the name which is above every other name. And we pray that thou would bless us, Lord, as a council, that thou would bless us, Lord, as a committee at this time, and the chair, and all the officers involved. We pray for them, Lord, that thou would sustain them, and that they would know the presence of the Lord. And we pray that thou would give us some wisdom from the only true and living God, the only true and wise God. We pray, Lord, that we would look to thee and set the Lord before us in all our doings. For thou art Lord of lords and King of kings, and there is no variableness nor shadow of turning with thee. Thou art the same yesterday and today and forevermore. And we thank thee, Lord, that we as sinners are able to access the throne of grace. Help us, Lord, to look to thyself. Bless us as an island, and bless us as a nation, and that we would pray for a day of thy power, that thou would visit us as families, as homes, as communities, and that we would know the presence of thy Holy Spirit, because it is the Spirit that quickens, and the flesh profits nothing. Help us now, Lord, as we go on with this meeting at this time, and pardon us from all of our sins, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Mackay. Just go through the usual housekeeping rules now that you're all familiar with anyway. With regard to the conduct of the meeting, the following points are before us. Please ensure your camera and microphone are off. This assists with broadband connectivity and also prevents background noise. I will call on the relevant officer to present the report. If a member or officer wishes to ask a question or raise a point, please do so by using the raise your hand function on your device. I will invite each member in the queue to speak, and at that point, please switch off your mic. Please switch on your mic and camera. After you have spoken, please ensure that you lower your hand and put your mic and camera off. Your device should be positioned so that your image is clear to the other participants, and please speak clearly and concisely directly at the camera. When calling for agreement of the recommendations at each item, a no show of raised hands will be an indication of the committee's approval. In regard to declarations of interest, members are reminded of the protocol. You must leave the meeting by ending the call, which will be confirmed by the moderator to the chair, and the following consideration of the item, you will be invited back into the meeting by the moderator. Please ensure you're available to accept the invite to rejoin. Finally, a reminder that the meeting is being live streamed. However, be aware that it's not been live streamed, but that it's been recorded. The recording will be made available on the KOLOS website following the meeting. That's housekeeping rules for today. Thank you. And before we move to the formal agenda, just a few notices for you. First of all, I want to welcome to the committee Councillor Grant Fulton and congratulate him on his election to the KOLO and his appointment to the committee. We look forward to his contributions in the coming months. I want also to pay tribute to Robert Emmett. Robert has been successful in his appointment to the Executive Director for Corporate Services at Dundee City Council, and we really wish Robert all the best and congratulate him on his appointment. His gain, Dundee's gain is certainly our loss, and we pay tribute to the last 15 years that he has served the council in this position and directed us and guided us through the many financial storms that we have faced and continue to face. So we wish him all the best. And also I'd like to mention Bernard Chisholm too, who is retiring at this time also, and we want to thank him for his work with the committee over the years and wish him all the best for the future. We had a number of ministerial meetings since we last met as a committee. On the 10th of November, along with the Kona leader and the director, we met with Fiona Hislop, the Cabinet Secretary for Economy, Fair Work and Culture, to discuss the situation at BIFAB and Arnish. We made the point to the Cabinet Secretary that it appeared that BIFAB's tenure at the yard was over and that new prospects for the yard should be explored. We pressed the case for new strategies to be developed around Arnish and for the exploration of wider options, including the establishment of interagency working group involving public and private sector representatives to consider a new strategy in relation to the yard and to explore options around multi-user, multi-tenant options, including work around oil, hydrogen and deep water port. The Cabinet Secretary shared our frustrations in relation to the current situation and was positive regarding the Kona's role in proactively seeking to identify energy opportunities for the area. Ms Hislop agreed that there would need to consider all options in relation to the yard whilst respecting existing relationships with BIFAB's owner. She indicated that the government were in ongoing discussions with Driver in relation to the prospects and options, and the key outcomes in terms of the proposals were anticipated within the coming weeks. The discussion was useful, and I was happy to hear that the Cabinet Secretary shared many of the Kona's aspirations around the future of the Arnish facilities, and that dialogue will continue as we go forward. Again, on the 25th of November, the Director and I met with the Minister for Rural Affairs and Natural Heritage, Environments, to discuss issues around the environmental designations that we have often raised in this committee, and that the committee instructed us to make representations to the Scottish Government. We reiterated to the Minister the concerns of the catching and processing sectors around the measures for the Sound of Barra, and the clear view that the measures would result in the loss of both fishing jobs and onshore processing jobs. We discussed the process whereby prospective candidate areas for designation are identified and how the community feels disenfranchised from these approaches and feel it is as if designations were simply imposed upon them. We reiterated the Council position that we are looking for a more appropriate balance between environmental, economic and community development, where we should be jointly exploring innovation around environmental designations to allow greater levels of community input and control. The Minister appeared very aligned to these ideas of community involvement and appeared open to exploring new opportunities. It was agreed that officials from Achola and Marine Scotland should meet to explore opportunities and report back in due course. And we also agreed that a further set of political meetings would be useful to provide oversight and strategic input. I'm hopeful that therefore that the meeting was an open process and dialogue, and we will see progress and improvement in this very important area. Thank you for your forbearance for these introductions, and we can now move to the formal agenda. Item 1 is the minutes of the meeting of the 23rd of September, and that is for noting. Thank you very much. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Members are asked to declare any interest they have in any items of the agenda. It would be helpful if members express why they are declaring interest in the item concerned. Please do so now using the raise hand function. And please ensure that the declaration is repeated prior to the relevant item and you adhere to the protocol as previously indicated. Councillor Calvin McMillan.
Thank you, Chairman. The item 2, my wife works in the business department and I shall be leaving the meeting for that item. And item 10, I'm a Croft tenant and there is measures there for the increased the permitted development rights. So I think that applies across the board. And although I declared an interest, I shall be staying in the meeting for that consideration of that item 10, if that's acceptable to yourself.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Any other declarations of interest? No, I'll be declaring interest in item 12, sorry, the leader programme item, as a member of the leader group, but I'll also be remaining in the meeting for that item. Thank you very much. We're now moving on to item 4, business plans, and this is a report by the Director of Assets and Finance and Resources. So this report is for consideration by all service committees and will be considered at P&R in conjunction with the concurrent budget strategy. I know I have a record for short meetings, but I've actually skipped an item. That wasn't intentional. Item 3 is performance management, and Mr. McPhee is here to report on Q2 of our economic development plan planning business plans. Mr. McPhee.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of performance management for Q2, the information begins in your report at item 6.1 with the Heritage Service. While the museum and Tascalon at Stornoway and the museum at Benbecula remain closed currently, the staff continue to deliver a range of services across the heritage sector and other sectors, and they're very heavily engaged in a number of projects and activities. The key activity has been in relation to ensuring we deliver those services to the best of our ability and consider and engage as best we can using digital means. And I think we've circulated now, I think twice, 2 newsletters and to members and to the wider community in terms of some of those digital engagement activities. And the team have performed very well in terms of those activities. It's the current activity is also focused on preparing a forward plan for both the heritage and for the archaeology service. In terms of archaeology, the archaeologist is very heavily involved on a number of projects. As you know, we have one archaeologist who deals with the planning aspects, the archaeology aspects of planning, as well as supporting a whole range of archaeology-related inquiries and projects, including the used virtual archaeology project in which he's engaged specifically. In terms of development planning, a range of activities and engagement across the team. Members will remember the engagement in relation to the regional spatial strategy. And these were very successful engagements with members across the various wards. And of course, there is still engagement in terms of preparing for the Planning Scotland Act. Some of that, as you're aware, has been delayed by the Scottish Government programme for transitional arrangements. It's noted there that further programme updates expected from government in Q3, and that has been the case, and we'll report those in our Q3 report. But there continues to be a wide range of engagement on supplementary guidance and other matters. In terms of development management, the service continues to deliver a service. Noted there how the significant number of pre-application inquiries, and that's been, a significant feature of Q2. We're also noting the number of applications over the period was down, but it has recovered significantly in Q3, and again we'll pick up that key information in our next quarterly report. But that's a good indicator of activity and a good indicator of activity across the whole section of the community throughout the islands. Building Standards continues to develop its projects and its activities. There's a report on building standards coming up, Chair, and there'll be an opportunity for members to be aware of some of the activities in which the Building Standards team are involved. In terms of economic development, you'll see quite a strong array of projects and activities in which the team are very directly involved, from the Island Steel strategic outline cases, which has been a significant amount of work, to the Castle Grounds regeneration project, Great Place project, arts funding, and other engagements across the creative sector. And particularly this time, there's been some significant activity around filming and good advertising for the Outer Hebrides and for the islands. Business Gateway, we've summarised there the activities of the Business Gateway team, who continue to deliver a whole range of schemes to support economic recovery, and they're still heavily engaged in delivery of all of those schemes. And the performance of the Business Gateway team is highlighted there at 8.7. You referred to the Leader programme yourself, Chair. There's a report on the committee agenda this time around in terms of the future Leader programme. Current activities relate to continuing to support the various projects that have been supported over the life of the Leader programme and the EMFF programme. In terms of financial performance at 10.1, you'll note the minus figure under economic development. That's just a credit which relates to the Scottish Government income we receive for business grants, but that will sort itself out in due course, and we are expecting all services to outturn. Obviously, there is concerns around loss of income from planning and other fees. These are the main kind of highlights, Chair. Happy to take any questions from members.
McPhee. Thank you, Mr. McPhee. Members have any questions on that item? No? Yes? Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chair. Not a member of your committee. Thanks for taking me in. My point was about the filming activity that's happening. It's really interesting to see all the work that's been happening recently in the islands, and as you mentioned, the road dance that's being filmed at the moment. I just wonder if there's any way of linking up with possibly the multimedia unit in education, and maybe getting some stock footage from these, you know, when the companies are up filming, this way to kind of do an arrangement with them to do a bit of filming, and then, you know, if we're doing any advertising in the future for jobs or whatever, we could use that footage for that. Just wondering.
Mr. McPhee.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's a very good idea, and we try to make sure that anybody who's filming and using whatever facilities that they may require, that we always get access to the content to support our sort of tourism marketing and promotion activities. And I'll certainly discuss with with staff the opportunity for acquiring some of the recent activity, because there's been quite a lot of activity, and look at engaging with the multimedia unit too, to see what is possible in terms of what we can use to promote, market and promote the islands. I'm sure you may all have seen the recent Secret Scotland programme, which featured Lewis Castle and Harris Tweed and Essence of Harris and various other things. And I know from the various businesses that were involved in that piece that immediately after that piece, the phones never stopped ringing, and there was significant activity. It's a powerful medium, and it's a powerful message when we have any of these types of when we have that kind of television coverage. It really does impact positively on the islands. But I've briefed Councillor Steele on some of that activity in the past, and his interest is very much appreciated, and we'll certainly make sure that we capitalise on this as best we can.
Yes, Mr. McPhee, that was an excellent programme indeed. Any other contributions at this stage? Otherwise, and as far as this committee's interests are concerned, members are asked to note the report.
Noted.
Thank you. We will now move on to item 4, the business plans. As you know, this report has been under consideration by all the service committees. The report recommends proposals that aim to realise savings of 3.5 million across 2021 to 23, and these are detailed in Appendix A. There are 4 lines relevant to this committee, and these are BP 34, Communities Travel Budget, BP 44, Economic Development, BP 45, Funding to the Creative Sector, and BP 48, Town Centre Scheme. I will ask the Director for Assets, Finance and Resources and our own Director for Communities to speak and address the proposals relevant to this committee, and members will be afforded an opportunity to ask questions afterwards. Mr. Emmett.
Thank you, Chair. You provided a good introduction to the item there yourself, so I won't repeat that. But it is important that the context of this is we have a significant financial challenge to reach for next year, and many of the proposals in front of you there require quite a lot of work to get them up and running in time for the new financial year. This is an opportunity for the committee to interrogate the specific proposals that fall within its remit, and either myself or Calamay and McKeever will be happy to answer any questions that members have.
Thank you, Mr. Emmett. Do you have anything to addition to our Director at the moment? No.
Not at this stage, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Members, do you have any questions at this time? Mr. Murray.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to repeat what I said at Communities and Housing. There was quite a substantive debate on it, but I want to say that I believe that these decisions should be left till February when we have all the impact assessments. And I think I moved an amendment at Communities and Housing. Don't propose to move it here again, but I'd like my dissent recorded. But I think without the impact assessments, it's not conducive to good decision making. Thank you.
Your dissent is recorded, Mr. Murray. Thank you. Any other questions on this item? If not, insofar as this committee's interests are concerned, do members agree with the recommendations of 3.1? Thank you. Item 5 is the Heritage Services Progress Update. The report provides a progress update on the implementation of the recommendations arising from the Museums and Archive Internal Audit Review considered by Audit and Scrutiny on the 29th of September this year. Audit and Scrutiny requested a progress update on the critical actions arising from the audit review, which are detailed in paragraphs 4.2 of the report. The report will be considered by the Audit and Scrutiny Committee next week, and is before you here as a Service Committee for noting. And Mr. McPhee is available to answer any questions on this item. No questions then, insofar as this committee's interests are concerned. Do members note the report? Thank you. We now move on to item 6, Archaeology Service Progress Update. The report provides progress update on the implementation of the recommendations for the Archaeology Service Internal Audit Review, considered again by Audit and Scrutiny on the 29th of this year. There's an action plan detailed in Appendix 1 to the report, and the draft Unlocking Potential Plan is provided in Appendix 2. The report will be considered by Audit and Scrutiny next week, and is before you here as a service, again, as for the Service Committee for noting. Mr. McPhee is here to ask any questions, answer any questions, but I can ask them too, but no questions at this present time. And again, Mr. McPhee.
Yes, apologies, Chair. Just in terms of this particular committee's interest, of course, this is the parent committee, and we would look to provided a progress update report, as you've said, which will go to Audit and Scrutiny. There's also the Archaeology Forward Plan, at paragraph 5.7 of the report. And given the interest of this committee, it would be good for this if this committee could consider and approve that updated archaeology forward plan. In terms of future activity, there's been significant update on the unlocking potential plan, which is part of our the first item there, the research framework and agenda at 5.41. We now have, and of course, a copy of the draft plan is attached as an appendix. There's been significant movement on that. We will report to the next quarter, but just for your information, there's now a funding proposal of circa £84,000 of investment in archaeology over the next 3 years. HIE are incredibly supportive of the plan, as are UHI. We're currently considering our input into that, which will, of course, largely be dictated by our ability to fund any match funding, subject to the outcome of any budget consultation decisions. So that's just for your information, but it would be, I think, very good for the committee to formally approve the or consider the forward plan at paragraph 5.7.
Certainly move to approve that. Karina.
Thank you, Chair. It's just really in terms of the funding that has already been identified with regard to this, and I think we should commend our officers for their diligence in securing something like £600,000 worth to take that forward, and I think that's something that will be very welcome right across the islands.
Indeed, Convener. Thank you. Anyone else continuing at the present time? Okay, thank you. And the recommendations are 3.1 for your agreement. Thank you. We now move on to item 7, renewable energy. As the Crown Estate Local Asset Management Pilot report seeks authorisation for the progression towards phased implementation of the Crown Estate Scotland Local Assessment Management Pilot. The COLA has always been clear that the island community should manage its own marine assets. In the pursuance of their long-held objectives, the COLA intends to take advantage through the Crown Estate Scotland Act 2019 of the Act's provision for permanent transfer or delegation of the Crown Estate management to the local community. The local asset management pilot scheme is quite an undertaking for the COLA, but there are advantages, and John Cunningham will now address these and answer any questions. Mr. Cunningham.
Thanks, Chair. As you've said, this is a pilot moving towards acquisition of full powers through the Crown Estate Act. So our objective ultimately is to take over management of Crown Estate assets in Hebridean waters. And there is, as you've said, quite a bit of work in this pilot, but the Cabinet Secretary has indicated that anybody seeking these powers has to go through this process. So we're looking at a soft launch of members agree in the spring of next year, and then a transition period through to possibly the end of the next calendar year when we go live on our own as asset management pilots. It's in partnership with Golson Estates, so the learning we take from Golson could be applied to other community landowners who show a willingness to take on management, so it could expand in that way. Just to point out, Chair, that this is entirely separate from Crown Estate revenues. They're returning to the CORLA through a separate process, and £4 million has already returned over the last 2 years. This is purely about asset management, leases in the seabed and the foreshore, but happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham, for your report and for that presentation. Any questions from members on this item? I think it's very positive progress, and this was all hard for over many years.
Chair.
Convener.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, I think it is important to continue on with this, and I think as part of that, we do need to keep other people in the loop as well if we're going to be able to get what we want in terms of the management of the Crown Estate assets around the islands. And I think there's significant benefit there, not just in terms of things like renewables, but there are benefits there for other industries that are dependent on coastal waters as well.
Indeed. Thank you, Convener. Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Otherwise, the recommendations of 3.1 there for your agreement. Thank you. We're now moving on to item 8. It's the Energy Overview 2020. This is a report that was requested from the last meeting and provides an overview of the island energy landscape and transition and covers a wide range of topics from outlining the roles of the National Grid, SSE and Ofgem, updates for the Western Isles Transmission Link project, and explores the potential of hydrogen to transform the local energy landscape. The report also presents an update on a long-term project put forward for support through the Islands Deal for an Outer Hebrides energy hub. And again, John Cunningham will speak to this report and answer any questions.
Thanks, Chair. As you've said, it's a very wide-ranging report, a lot of diverse content in there, so happy to answer any questions from members if any members are seeking clarification on the points there, but it does cover quite a lot of ground.
It is a comprehensive report, and I thank you for that. Just as a guide to members, you'll be aware that you've been informed that Mr. McCormack has an amendment. But before we hear from Mr. McCormack to outline his amendment, I want to provide the opportunity for members to ask questions exclusively on the content of this report first before we move on any further. I've got Councillor Carl McLean.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee, but I just want to reference 11.3 in the report. If Mr. Cunningham could give a wee bit of enlargement on this, he says there that new build community projects become very challenging in the present situation. Can he enlarge on that?
Mr. Cunningham?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The community projects we have in place to date were funded or supported through either the feed-in tariff for smaller schemes or renewable obligations certificates for the larger schemes. Both these regimes have stopped now, so they're no longer available. The new support scheme is the contract for difference allocation rounds. And with that, you have to have planning permission in place and you have to go forward to a blind competitive auction in order to win a contract for difference, which is effectively a price support that gives you a levelised price regardless of the market for electricity. So a community generator starting from scratch nowadays would have to fund their own planning and development through to the stage of getting planning permission. They would then have to go into a blind auction to win a contract for difference with no certainty of success. So that's one very challenging aspect of it. And the other is that National Grid are proposing to impose transmission charges on all generators, commercial and community. So there will be an additional cost on new community generators going forward. And it's challenging enough to build in the islands without having these additional costs layered on. So we think it's not impossible, but it's becoming much more challenging than it has been in the past.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Cunningham. Sorry, Chair, can I just...
Yes.
You mentioned the fact before they even start with a spade in the ground, the funding before they even start is extremely challenging, even to obtain funding. Would you agree?
Yeah, the planning process requires environmental impact assessment, aviation studies, bird studies, peat studies. That could ramp up to several hundreds of thousands of pounds. And you need to have that funded before you even go in for planning permission. And then you need planning permission before you can go to the auction. So the question there would be, in the old days, you could plan a wind farm and you'd know before you started any work at all what level of return you're going to get over the life of that wind farm. It's now much more of a gamble because you're going into a competitive auction. So there are these front-loaded costs. And we reckon it'd be difficult to find funders who would support these costs because you have no certainty on getting a contract for difference at the end of the day.
Okay.
Thanks.
Right.
Thank you.
Mr. Finnegan, Councillor Paul Finnegan.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee. It was just to ask about the role of Hebridean Energy. I'm on the board of Heb Energy, and I'm just wondering if there's a role for Heb Energy in terms of representing the council and trying to sort of act as a central point to sort of help take some of these initiatives forward.
Yeah, thanks again, Chair. Hebrides Energy, the vision for Hebrides Energy is that it ultimately becomes a licensed electricity supply company. Now, this is looking towards the time when the Stornoway and Uisneach wind farms are built, and there's the 20% share in Stornoway available to the community, 30% at Uisneach. So that would put 80 to 100 megawatts in the hands of the community. And the purpose of Hebrides Energy was a community company that would act as a licensed electricity supplier, which would offtake electricity from the shared ownership in these wind farms and retail it to the local community at as near cost price as possible. That's the long-term vision, and Councillor Finnegan's right that there is a role before that. I mean, that's not coming until the mid-2020s. But there certainly would be a role for Hebrides Energy to remain in place and to promote the various initiatives. Hydrogen's mentioned in the report. We think there's a real role there for Hebrides Energy, along with certain other aspects of what's been reported in the paper.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. Are there any more questions on the content of the report?
Chairman, could I ask a question?
Yes, Mr. McCormack, of course.
Thank you very much. First of all, perhaps I could say how very grateful I am at the way in which the council responded to the very unfortunate breach in the cable. Not only did you do it quickly, but you did it very, very effectively, and I'd like to record my thanks to you for doing that. The questions I would like to ask, I just want to ask a couple of questions. I'd like to thank Mr. Cunningham for his report, which is extremely detailed, and I appreciate that, since I suppose I asked most of the questions. At item 10.2 on Hebrides Energy, you've made some reference to that just now, Mr. Cunningham. I wonder if there is any way in which using the energy that is currently being produced in the island, Hebrides Energy could come more early to a situation where it would be able to offer low-cost electricity to island consumers.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Hebrides Energy is in place just now as a community interest company. It's not licensed, but that could be done quite quickly. We would dearly like, as a company, to get involved with the community generators to make that link between local generation and consumption. But some of the generators are tied into long-term purchase agreements specified by their lenders. So we are talking to the community generators, and at the first opportunity, we'd like to get involved with them and be able to become their PPA supplier, as it were. The main issue there is that you're aiming to provide cheap electricity to the local community, which means you'd want to purchase it cheap. And these community generators are tied into quite onerous borrowing arrangements, which means they need a substantial return on their product in order to fund borrowing. So there's a balance to be struck there, but we'd certainly want to get involved in that. Beyond that, Hebrides Energy could become involved with a major supplier, become a white label supplier. We've tried that on 2 occasions, but on both occasions the parent company has fallen out of the market. So that's a very tricky business to be in. The beauty with having our own local supply of electricity for the community is that we're not subject to the vagaries of the electricity market, which fluctuates widely and knocks all these new start companies out of business quite quickly. So we'd have a stable supply of energy from our own renewables, able to market that onto customers. And it's something, Councillor McCormack, that we are looking at quite actively at the moment.
Yes, thank you. Well, the other question I wanted to ask was in regard to the section on hydrogen, 13.1 and onwards. There are a number of local wind farms who actually have active hydrogen projects at the moment. And I wonder why it is that you would not want to get all of them together so that they could feed into the group that you have established here. The other 2 things that they can feed in is their projects, the people who are supporting their projects, which are very often doing it for nothing, because they're community organisations, and I think the council could benefit from the advice. And the support that some of these organisations have already received from funding they've received from elsewhere. And I just feel it would all fit into one big hydrogen strategy that we could use. So it might be useful to have representation on this group from the community organisations. There are 3 community organisations that have active hydrogen projects, and even if one representative from these 3 organisations was available, that would help, I think. The other experience they have, of course, is of actually producing wind on the island, which nobody else but the local wind farms have. So I think it would be useful to have some sort of idea of just exactly what is going on, and I'm absolutely confident that they'll be more than happy to share all of their technical information with you to assist in taking your project forward.
Mr. Kynham.
Thanks, Chair. In regard to hydrogen, there was a consortium of agencies set up temporarily just to look at the SGN opportunity within Stornoway Town gas network. That was just an umbrella group of agencies, and Community Energy Scotland were there to represent the local groups. But I take Councillor McCormack's point, and we are, members will see at section 14, we're moving towards an integrated energy hub based at Darnish through the Islands deal. That's going to need its own management framework or structure, and we are looking to see how the community can be represented within that structure. And I think it might ultimately be for the corner to appoint a representative from the communities onto that group in due course, which is what Councillor McCormack suggested there.
Very good. Councillor Alison MacLeod.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank Mr. Cunningham for an excellent report, very comprehensive report. Gives us an overview with many interesting and important strands. I'm going to ask him a question he might not be able to answer. That's for an awkward councillor to ask. In 2017, Nicola Sturgeon announced that the SNP government would be setting up a publicly owned, not-for-profit energy company, which would be in place by 2021. Is Mr. Cunningham aware of any progress with this national energy company?
Yeah, thanks again, Chair. We engaged with that process quite early because obviously our own plans for Hebrides Energy could have cut across what the Scottish Government was proposing. So we gave evidence to the Government very early in that process. And over time, their position shifted from forming an outright energy company to supply energy across Scotland to becoming more of a facilitator, providing behind-the-scenes back office support. I think that was a recognition from them that they could see in some areas quite a lot was already being done in terms of community supply of electricity, and a recognition particularly of their own situation where they hadn't heard just how advanced things were in terms of Hebrides Energy. So it's still a concept, but maybe not the way the government had first envisaged it.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. Are there any more questions on the actual report? If not, I'm going to bring Mr. McCormack in now, as he's notified you of a potential amendment, and invite him to outline what he is suggesting.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to put the case. I have, as you know, advocated this Skye interconnector upgrading for many years now. I can't remember just how long. At no time have I ever been opposed to the actual interconnector itself, the 600 megawatts. Indeed, I think I must have voted for it 4 times in the course of my time on the council. And I do realise that there may well be some people at this meeting today who have never actually voted for it, but nonetheless support it. So I just want to make it clear that I do very much support the 600 megawatt cable. But I think there is much to be gained by having an interconnector to Skye. I've argued for it to be upgraded for donkey's years. And if we are to believe what SSE are alleged to have said publicly, they are looking at the possibility of possibly 100 megawatts. And that is always what I have argued for. In fact, I had PST carry out a study, which I have shared with the council, It was carried out by Zero Energy, and they made it clear that this is something that's entirely practical. And I think that in the public statements that are allegedly have been made by SSEN, that they seem to be saying that they agree with that. So therefore, I think it would be appropriate for the council to push to get the Skye upgrade really to as high a level as we can possibly get it. And I'm suggesting 100 megawatts because it is a figure which would allow community renewables to expand to a level where we could accommodate all of those community renewable projects that are being discussed at the moment. Now, in saying that, I am recognizing that it is not just simply a question of laying a cable. I recognize that there are many, many related issues that have to be overcome. John mentions them in his report, all the businesses around transmission, distribution, cable end kits, subsidies and all that sort of thing. All of these would have to be brought into consideration to resolve the situation to allow this project that I have in mind to go ahead. But I think it's worth making an effort to see if we can make this work, because the advantages to our community would be significant. In terms of financial return, we're talking possibly £10 million per year if we manage to get that cable working at full capacity. And I think that's something that's well worth doing. It could be transformative for our community. Even the small number of wind farms we have at the moment are producing somewhere in the region of £2 million per year for the community in a good wind year. So I would like us to take this opportunity. The cable has been breached. A new cable must be put in. We need to try and make that sure that cable is as big as possible. I'm suggesting a target of 100 megawatts is a good thing to go for. Public statements coming from SSEN seem to suggest they're not averse to that idea. But I do know there's much more to it than that. And my motion, my amendment rather, makes the point that it is together with all the necessary technical adjustments necessary. In other words, I'm recognizing that it's not just a question of agreeing to do a cable. I believe too, Chair, that the Scottish Government has significant chunks of capital monies which it could easily use for a project like this, because this project would be transformational for these islands. And I think we have a very, very good argument to make on this. And I have absolutely no doubt at all that in the course of your discussions, your officers' discussions with the Scottish Government just now, you're making these kinds of arguments. This is just an additional argument to make. And the third point that I make in my motion is that it should be for community-sponsored projects. And again, I recognise that that is a challenge, but I have to assure you that when the present community project started off, the challenge was no less. I mean, the organisation I'm involved with, Pointed Sandwick, it took us 10 years to get to financial close. We know there are challenges, but if we don't have the interconnector there in the first place, we'll never do anything. And what I don't want to happen is that at some point down the line there is competition. There should be plenty of room for local projects to go ahead, and it looks like, at the moment anyway, SSEN are keen to comply. And the other rather negative thing, of course, that came out in the press recently, Chair, was the fact that SSEN are making statements like the main interconnector is not now going to happen until 2027. I don't think these kind of statements are very helpful, and I sincerely hope that that is not the case. But in the meantime, since SSEN is going to be under some urgency to replace the interconnector to Skye, I think it's well worth our while engaging with them and trying to get the best possible deal we can for our communities.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Your view is well known over the years. You've campaigned passionately on this issue, and I appreciate what you've been saying, and we're sympathetic in terms of what you've outlined. But it's important that we note at the present time that SSE haven't really made a statement in terms of where they are going forward. They are still looking into the options of constructing the cable, and are looking at different options as we go forward. And you know, the council has been in dialogue with them since this breach, and will continue to be so. So I think it's important, if you're in agreement, that until they conclude their cost-based analysis of this situation, that we defer what you are proposing to a future meeting of the CORA in the new year, when we'll have a better evidence-based analysis of where we are in terms of SSE's position. So if you're agreeable to that, we will defer what you're proposing as an amendment to discuss in light of the outcome of SSE's deliberations, and indeed our own dialogue with them as a council. Mr. McCormick?
Yes, I'm minded to be sympathetic to what you're suggesting, Chair. I wonder if you could indicate to me what exactly we might put in the minute in regard to what is going to happen.
Just as I've outlined to you there, that we defer what you have outlined until the new year, when we have a better understanding and a position from SSE and the conclusion of their cost-based analysis, and that in the meantime that members will be kept informed of the dialogue that's going on between the CORA and SSE. Sorry, Mr. McCormick, I didn't catch you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Would it be correct for me to deduce from what you have said that you are sympathetic to the proposal that I have made?
We are sympathetic in terms of it going forward to the next series of meetings in light of what position we get from SSE. I think that's really crucial, because we cannot come to a conclusion on this matter today until we know exactly what the position is. I'm happy to bring in the Director if you want some more clarification on this.
Thank you, Chair. I think we have been in dialogue with SSEN, and what they are telling us is that they are looking at all possible options, and they are running an optioneering process to look at all these possible options. They're running a cost-benefit analysis on these options, which they're telling us they will have ready in a number of weeks. They will then be coming out to consult with stakeholders and others in regard to what they see as their preferred solution. At that time, when they come with that preferred solution, we will be able to have a look and fully understand all the technical aspects of that, and then we will be in a better place to understand exactly what they're saying and what the various impacts are. So at this stage, the discussions with SSEN have been to push them towards an optimised solution to the cable replacement. That optimisation to be in terms of cable size, the speed of the replacement, and to ensure that any costs accruing to bill payers across the Outer Hebrides are minimised. So I think what the CORA should be looking to do is defer on Mr. McCormick's proposed amendment until the policy position and the outcome of the cost-benefit analysis process is known. We will then have all the technical and cost factors at hand and be able to understand them, and then be better placed to come to a conclusion in regard to the CORA's policy position. But I would reiterate that what we are trying to achieve is the optimized position for the cable, both in terms of the size of that cable, the speed of delivery for that cable, and the minimization of costs to bill payers.
Mr. McCormack?
I hear you, Chair, and I hear the Director. I'm very keen on 100 megawatts. How do you feel about that? Is that part of your argument with SSEN, especially in light of the alleged assertions coming from them in the press?
I think our position is to seek the maximum capacity we possibly could. But I'm going to bring in the leader. Mr. Mackay's going to come in just now.
Yeah, just it might prove helpful to the conversation. Just to give you an update of where we have been with SSE on this since the breakage in the cable. I think we just have to be a wee bit careful and behave responsibly at the minute until such time as we get some feedback. And whilst we're all sympathetic to the aspirations that Angus has outlined, it's just the timing of it that's quite important. And this is the reason why. When the cable first broke, we had early meetings with SSE, and the initial reaction from them was quite obviously, the cable is broken, we need to replace it as quickly as possible with a similar cable. That was the first reaction. Of course, we attended meetings, Colin McKeever and I, and we said, listen, you have to do an exercise here to see what is the optimum, what is the best solution you can get for this cable. So you're going to replace it anyway. Can you make sure that it's the biggest possible cable within a particular time frame? So that is why in fairness to them, that is why they've now gone away to do a cost-benefit analysis on the different options and different sizes. So I think it's only fair that we wait till they come back and then take a decision on what we are going to press. And the reason why it is important just to hesitate at the minute and allow them to come back. See, the first thing they were going to do was come back within a week or a fortnight because they were just going to go for a standard replacement cable. And now, because we've asked them to go and look at different sizes of cable, it's going to take a little bit longer. So I think we anticipate them coming back within a month or so with details of what the different options are. And the two things I would say that might drive us to think that we should maybe hesitate at the minute and wait until they do that are, one, if we were to shout for a particular size of cable and it resulted in an extraordinarily longer time to put it in because of all the problems that Angus yourself have alluded to that may arise in terms of, there are challenges, but that's fine. But if it's going to take a lot longer, I think we need to speak to our community generators to see if would they be happy with the council taking a position that we push for a solution that might take 2 to 3 years rather than 1 year, and the income that they would have to sacrifice. And secondly, we would have to be very, very clear if there's issues around distribution and transmission, that if there was going to be an additional cost to all the consumers on the island, would we be comfortable with that? Because, as well, Councillor McCormack himself is a great leader in the fuel poverty issue. So to do something that would increase costs to the householder would not maybe be something that we want to think a bit more about. So that's why it's quite a sensible thing to do, to wait until we get the feedback and the options, and then we can take an informed decision about what we as a council are going to press with. But at the minute, as we've reported earlier, we had asked, the reason they're doing this is because we indeed have asked them to look at a solution that's the best solution for these islands in terms of time and cost. So I think it's prudent to wait.
Thank you, Leader. Did you want to come back in, Mr. McCormack? Are you happy with that?
No, I'm prepared to accept the suggestion that you've made. It will be necessary, I think, for you just to get the support of my seconder, Councillor Murray.
Mr. Murray, I would like to come in just now.
Thank you, Chair. I've been listening to the discussion. I think what Councillor McCormack is trying to achieve, as myself, is some sort of political steer from the core in regards to this issue. And I hear what you're saying, that you're sympathetic, and it's good to have unity of purpose. But if you're not going to accept the amendment and defer it, then I want to see something a bit substantial in the minute with regards to a dedicated community line for this interconnector.
We've made clear, Mr. Murray, all along for many years our support for community developments, and that's why getting it interconnected is so crucial. So I think we're on the same page really in terms of this. And the agreement, the minute will capture the discussion that we have said, and we will return to it, I can assure you, in the new year at the next series of meetings.
Okay, thank you for that, Chair. I look forward to
Mr. McCormack.
Thank you, Chair.
Are you okay to agree then to proceed as we've outlined?
Chairman.
Who's that?
Ray McKenzie.
Mr. McKenzie.
Right. Thank you. I'm not on your committee. It's not directly in relation to what the discussion that's just gone before, but during the discussion, the director mentioned that the cost should be minimised, and quite right to the local population. Could it not be stronger than that, Director, that there should be no cost, because of course wasn't their cable and it wasn't their fault that the cable broke, but as with other circumstances, the load, if I can use that word, should be spread over their distribution area, not concentrated obviously on the Western Isles population.
Do you want the director to come back on that?
Well, yes, it was just I was picking up that when he says the cost should be minimised to the people in the Western Isles. There shouldn't be any extra cost. That's basically what I'm saying.
The way the system works, Chairman, at the moment, the Sky Harris link is a distribution link. To move it up to a 132 kV link, which would be required for 100 megawatts, would make it then a transmission link. So transmission links are funded in various different ways, and one of the ways is a part of the cost is recouped across the area. So that would be the North of Scotland area. So I don't know at this stage what the cost of a 132 kV transmission link would be, what the cost of that would be, and therefore what the cost of that would ramp into the North of Scotland bill payer and the Western Isles bill payers bill. So that is one of the considerations we have to think about, that when you go onto a transmission link, it is funded and paid for in a different way that may have an impact on bill payers. So I think there is a balance for us to strike in our considerations here. Yes, we want the biggest possible size of cable. We want the cable to be built in the speediest time, but we also want to ensure that we're not finding unexpected costs coming through onto bill payers. So these are some of the things I think the chairman is wanting a bit more time for, till we fully understand all the implications of moving potentially from distribution to transmission.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. The point. The point that it is going to be spread across the distribution area, the North of Scotland, and that's really the point I was trying to establish. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Callum McMillan and Councillor Charlie Nicholson and the convener, and then we'll draw this to a close. Mr. McMillan.
Thank you, Chairman. My concern here, I was delighted that Councillor McCormack had taken it forward and supported by Councillor Murray, but I do feel that the Euston Barra part of the islands, as we call them, are being left out, because the Eust connector to Skye, which goes to the same point in Skye, is at the same terminal stage as the one to Harris. And if we're going to have an amendment or a proposal by the council, it should be that there should be an equal-sized link to Euston Barra, so that we have to take that into consideration, so that we're not then blocked out, or that nobody is blocked out by saying, oh, the link through Skye goes to Harris, and then the people of Euston Barra are marooned. It's not the Stornoway Town Council anymore, and I would say that to Councillor McCormick in the wording of the amendment, that it has to be across the islands, and that we have to look at the benefit across the islands equally. And the Eust and Barra connector at the moment, it's just about to go the same way as the one to Harris, and we should look at the both cables in the same context, so that they are both included for equity and equality in the report when it comes back in January. Thank you, Chairman.
Very good point, and we'll try and capture that when we report back in January. Mr. Nicholson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Not a member of your committee, and I would be backing what you're saying yourself, Chair, the way forward is. Because in early discussions, we were using this word alleged SSE statements. We can't go on allegements. We've got to go on the facts. And the leader has made it very clear the importance of the timing and being fair and careful. And we have to be very careful. We can't go ahead with what's before us just now without having the full facts in front of us. And the director has made a very, very clear picture. And so has Mr. Cunningham in regards to the community projects. The goalposts have changed over the years. We've heard earlier in the report the difficulties on that. Yes, we want to support the community. Yes, we want to take them forward. But we can't go on alleged statements. We've got to wait until the facts, until SSE has come back, and the point by the leader, the timing and being careful. So I will be backing you very clearly, Chair, on the way that your committee is taking this forward.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholson. I'm going to bring the convener in here now.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, and it is to do with the optioneering that SSE are carrying out at the moment. I think it is important that we remind them of the impact of the break in the cable right now in terms of greenhouse gases and everything else with regard to the way electricity is generated throughout Lewis and possibly parts of Harris at this stage. So I think the best option is for there to be a number of cables that will become a circuit, so that should there be a break in any of the cables, then at least the lights aren't going to go out, and we're not going to be dependent on diesel-fired power stations. So I think it's important that we push them on that. I think the capacity that we were speaking of right at the very start of this process was a 600 megawatt connection between Bewley and Arnish. There are some constraints still in Fort Augustus in terms, as far as I'm aware, there are still constraints in Fort Augustus. But the reality is, if we were just now talking about cables coming across the English Channel between England and France, the cables would already be in place by now, pretty much. And I think we really do need to be pressing our case to make sure that we get the optimum benefits out of whatever connectivity we get between here and the mainland, because ultimately we could be powering significant parts of the central belt of Scotland, as was originally envisaged through Hunterston. So I think we do need to press them, and we shouldn't be letting them off the hook because they're not doing us a great service at the moment.
Thank you, Convener. I just want to thank Mr. McCormack for the points that he's made, and it's an agreement for us to defer this until SSE have concluded their cost-based analysis, and then we'll return to this at our January series. The recommendations are at 3.1 in addition to what we have outlined as a decision. Thank you. We're now to item 9, and that's the ScotWind offshore wind leasing round. This report provides information of the new ScotWind leasing round for offshore wind, recently launched by County Estate Scotland on the 8th of October 2020. Marine Scotland publishes sectoral plan for offshore wind, which identifies 17 potential areas of deployment for offshore wind, and 3 of these AODs are located around the Outer Hebrides. And John Cunningham will speak to this report and answer any questions. Mr. Cunningham.
Thanks, Chair. Just a brief update on the timing. We're expected the leases to be advertised in the autumn of this year, with a conclusion in January 21. But the process is remaining open until 31st of March 21 due to COVID and other constraints on the procurement process. So the window's open to 31st of March. We expect results in the summer, and then these developers would go at the earliest into CFD auction 2023, and we anticipate deployment in the sea 26-27, just to give members a sense of the timescale. But happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. Any questions? Convener, set your hand up from the previous item. Thank you.
Apologies, Chair. Yeah.
Not at all. Any questions, Mr. Cunningham? No? Well, the recommendations are 3.1 there for your agreement. Thank you. And item 10 is a Scottish Government consultation on the permitted development rights in planning. This report advises members of a Scottish Government consultation on phase 1 of the changes to permitted development rights in planning was closed on 12th of November. As the consultation fell out of the committee cycle, the report seeks homologation of the coroner's response, which is provided in the appendix to the report. Mary McKeever is here to speak to the report and answer any questions. Mary, are you online?
Chair, thank you. Nothing further to add to the report, but happy to take any questions, or my colleague Anne Napier's here if there's any technical questions in relation to permitted development. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions on that item? Otherwise, recommendations are 3.1 for your agreement. Thank you. Item 11 is the Building Standards Workforce Strategy. The report advice of the introduction of the Scottish Government National Building Standards Workforce Strategy. Strategy provided the appendix of the report will be implemented over a 3-year period and sets out key national commitments by the Scottish Government and local commitments for local government and other partners. This is a service that is not often reported to the committee, and I would like to take this opportunity to highlight and appreciate the important role that building standards teams play in the coroner's planning function and their contribution to the local economy and development. And I would like to welcome John Gillis, the Building Standards Manager, to address the report and answer any questions members may have. Mr. Gillis.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would just like to make a brief comment on this. This national workforce strategy, it came about initially by the Compliance and Enforcement Review Panel that was set up after the Oxgangs primary school incident in Edinburgh. And there was various things looked at, and one of the recommendations of that report was that building standards resilience should be improved because of the challenges that are faced. There are 3 key challenges. There's the operational resilience, which means that you need to have the building standards teams have to have the capacity and capability and contingency plans to meet all service demands. The difficulty with attracting and recruitment and retention of employees, particularly with the demographics, it tends to be an older demographic in most teams. So that's a challenge, and also access to learning and development, which is particularly an issue for remote areas like ourselves. And as the Chairman has said, the Scottish Government have noted the importance that building standards function has in processing building warrants, which nationally with a total value of 7 billion to the economy annually. And in our own area here, we process warrants with that have a value of work of about 40 million annually. So I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Mr. Gillis. Any questions from members for Mr. Gillis? I just want again to pay tribute to you and your team for the work you do. It's very much under the radar, and it's not very often that it's highlighted at committee. So maybe it could be a future item going forward that you report back into us on progress with the strategy. Thank you, Mr. Gillis.
Thank you, Chair.
Recommendations are at 3.1 there for your agreement. We now move to item 12, that's the Outer Hebrides Leader Programme 2014 to 2020 update, and I'm declaring interest, but I will remain in the meeting. As you're all aware, the current programme was due to close on the 31st of December 2020. However, additional funding was awarded by the Scottish Government for existing LEADER projects, effectively extending the active period of the LEADER programme to March 2021. A report to HR Subcommittee will consider extending the contracts of the existing LEADER staff team for a further 3-month period to 30th of June 2021 to ensure the successful conclusion and final closure of the longer LEADER programme. This report provides an update on the LEADER programme. You are all aware of the tremendous amount of work that has been done over its existence, which has been reported many times to this committee. It is yet unknown if there will be a replacement, but we await confirmation from the Scottish Government on the intention to establish a future LEADER-type community-led local development scheme. We anticipate that this will be the case, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank Kathleen and the LEADER team for all their hard work, and hope they will continue under a new scheme. Now, I think Donal MacDonald is here to answer any questions in relation to this report. Any questions from members? Otherwise, the recommendations are 3.1 for your agreement. Thank you. We now move to item 13, it's Economic Regeneration Strategy to 2020. The report is for noting and provides an update on the progress on the actions under the Outer Hebrides Community Planning Partnership Economic Regeneration Strategy to 2020. The appendix provides detailed information and evidence on the delivery of the actions under each of the essential themes: creative industries, energy, food and drink, tourism, defence, communities, financial and business services. And Mr. McPhee is here to speak to the report and answer any questions.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a comprehensive overview of the previous Economic Regeneration Strategy to 2020. Members will recall previous iterations of that strategy, creating communities of the future. It's important for us to review progress on actions and to consider the kind of breadth and the scope of what's been undertaken and what's been delivered. This report provides, I think, a summary of actions under each of the key themes, and any action that needs to be continued and carried forward will be carried forward under the auspices of the Economic Recovery Strategy, which, of course, the members approved in June earlier this year. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, if members have any specific questions in relation to any of the themes.
Thank you very much, Mr. McPhee. Over to you, members, in terms of questions or comments. Well, thank you. Members agree to note the report then. Thank you. We now move on to item 14, that's reports outstanding, and that is for noting. And that concludes our meeting. The next scheduled meeting of the committee will be on the 27th of January 2021. I would like to wish you all a safe and happy festive break. Fesca Ma, and thank you for your attendance and your contributions.
Thank you, Chair.